No matter how much you try, you seem not to remember a single detail from what you studied. This can be a very frustrating situation for everyone. And right here on today's video, I'm going to be dishing out why you will not remember anything you study no matter how much you try. I'm going to be showing you the mistakes you make while studying, and I'm going to be providing solutions to those mistakes in order for you to be able to remember anything you study at any point in time, and in order for you not to repeat such mistake anymore. Before I go into the main content of today's video, I'm going to be starting by explaining the different stages that you have to pass through in order for you to be able to retain a particular information and as well be able to remember that particular information. There are 3 stages you need to pass through. So on today's video, I'm going to be taking you through each of these stages. I'm going to be taking you through mistake you make on each stages, and I'm going to be providing solution to each of those mistakes. So I'll be going through the stages step by step. Grab your notepad because this is going to be a very long video and I want you to pay attention as I go on. The first stage is putting information into your brain. The second stage is keeping the information in your brain, and the third stage is getting the information. You have to appropriately encode the information before you be able to keep the information, and also before you be able to retrieve the information. So you can't leave anyone out. If you do one wrongly, it will affect the other. There are mistakes you make that will not allow you to remember anything you study no matter how much you try in these 3 stages. So I'll be going through the first stage, which is putting information into your brain. There are mistakes you make while you are doing this, and these mistakes you make will never allow you to remember what you study no matter how much you try. If you keep reading from now to tomorrow, if you don't do all these things that I'm about to show you, you will not remember. You'll just keep studying and you discover that nothing is happening. But then I will point out this mistake you make and I'll give you the appropriate steps you need to take in order to avoid this mistake. Now, most students adopt shallow processing. What is shallow processing? Shallow processing is a situation whereby you neglect deriving meaning from what you are studying. You don't want to connect ideas. You just want to read the words only and put it down in your exam. You don't care about how it relates to each other, what meaning you can derive from what you are reading, and how well you'll be able to explain at any point in time. If you can snap everything you need to read just by blinking it, some people will do it because they just want to put it in their brain and put it back. But it doesn't work like that. Your brain is not just anywhere that you can drop something and you just decide that you want to pick it up any point in time. You have to do it step by step. You want to build a house, you need to lay the appropriate foundation. If you don't do the foundation very well, you don't expect to have a good building. Just that's how reading is also, or putting something in your brain. You have to lay the good foundation. If you don't lay it very well, there is no how you'll be able to remember, and there's no how you'll be able to even keep the information. If you adopt deep processing, you'll be able to look for how this information connects to each other, the implications of these concepts. How does it make sense to you? How can you relate it to your environment? How can you connect it to what you have read before? These are the questions you should ask yourself when you are doing deep processing. And in deep processing, there are 2 ways you can adopt deep processing. You can adopt it either by organizing information in similar patterns, and if you remember a specific thing, you'll be able to remember the rest. If you've not watched the video I spoke about chunking on the card above, when I was explaining chunking, you can chunk your information in such a way that you can group informations together that has similar characteristics. So this is a way of using deep processing. If you group them in a way that they have similar characteristics, if you remember the characteristic, you remember the rest. It's just like you having gender. We have gender and we have male and female. If you remember gender, you know male and female is under. That's just the way it is. So group the information in a way that it has a single name for everything. So if you remember one thing, you remember the rest. That is what we call spreading activation. But when we get to the retrieval part, I will explain that better. So that is one way of using deep processing. Another way of using deep processing is self-explanation. And self-explanation is a situation whereby you write things in your own words, whether you are in class or whether you are studying on your own. When you are in class, when the lecturer is teaching, because when you are in class also, you are also encoding information. It's a new topic, you don't know anything about it. Your first encounter is in class. You have to appropriately encode the information. And while you are in class, when you are doing this, it is expected that you take notes. And when you are taking notes, don't write everything word for word like the lecturer is saying it. Write it in your own way. And that is the way you can enhance the understanding and be able to keep it well. And also, when you are explaining, when you are reading, also try as much as possible to write it in your own words, because it's going to help you to keep the information very well and you'll be able to remember at any point in time. So that's all about shallow processing and deep processing. And also, there is something that I want to point out. When you are doing exam, as much as shallow processing is not a good way of studying, now in a situation whereby you have different types of exam supposed to be tested for essay, objective question, and fill in the gaps. And for fill in the gap exam, you have to provide a particular word for that particular thing that they are asking. And if you cannot provide it, that is all. So what I will advise you is that you should try to know how to use the two and be able to switch between the two. Adopt shallow processing and also connect ideas when you are reading. These two can be very useful, because if you adopt shallow processing for an essay exam, you are going to fail. If you adopt deep processing for a fill in the gap or multi-choice exam, you are going to fail. So, and most of the time, you might not know how the exam will come in. You might not know how they will ask you the questions at the end of the day. So it is important for you to switch between the two. And when you get to the exam and you are given a particular question time, you won't be caught off guard, because you are well prepared for that particular exam. Another thing that will not make you remember anything you study, no matter how much you try, is lack of active engagement. What is active engagement? When I say active, it is the act of doing rather than passive. Passive is when you are not mindful of what you are learning, you are just going like that. But active is you are engaging with what you are learning, you are adopting specific strategy for you to be able to actively engage with what you are learning. But passive, you are not adopting any strategy, you are just doing it the way you like. Now, when I now talk about lack of active engagement, when you are reading, you don't adopt any strategy that will make you encode the information properly. You don't take notes. You don't try as much as possible to explain to someone else when you are reading. You don't draft out questions for yourself while you are reading. If you don't do all this when you are reading at the first instance, you will encode the information well and you have problem keeping it at the end of the day. So it is very important for you to actively engage with what you are learning. Teach it to someone else and check whether you've appropriately learn the information. Give yourself quizzes as you go on. Draft out questions when you are reading and ask yourself those questions as you go on to test yourself. That is the way you can check whether you are actually learning. But if you are not checking whether you are actually learning, then you are just wasting your time. You are not learning anything. So that is one way. And another thing that I would like to point out under the encoding is overload. Cognitive overload is a situation whereby you just try to pack everything to your head, and it doesn't work like that. Because one thing I want you to understand is that when you are reading something at the first instance, it goes to the short time memory. The short time memory is the working memory, and the working memory has limited capacity, and it is a point where you try to manipulate information and do every other thing that you need to do before it transfers to the long time memory. And when you are reading at the first instance, when you are encoding, is in the working memory, and you don't expect it to be in your brain immediately when you are reading something. Let me say it again. You don't expect what you are reading to stick into your memory immediately when you are reading it. And as much as your working memory has limited capacity, you should not overload it with so much information, because according to research, you can only keep 4 to 7 items in your working memory. And if it exceeds these 4 to 7 items, you are not going to remember anything. In fact, that is considered overload, and you won't encode the information properly. You won't be able to keep it, and eventually you will not be able to retrieve the information. So try as much as possible to adopt chunking. I explained it in my other video. You can check it immediately after this video. Chunking is a way of organizing the information in manageable chunks that will help you to simplify it in a way that you'll be able to keep it in your working memory, and you won't you won't experience cognitive overload. So in chunking, try as much as possible to avoid overload. Try as much as possible to adopt deep processing instead of shallow processing, and try as much as possible to engage with what you are learning. So if you adopt all this, you'll be able to learn properly, and you'll be able to, and keeping the information will be easy for you. But if all these things are not taken into account, you have problem keeping the information, and eventually you have problem remembering. So that is that. But before I explain what you need to do when keeping the information, there is one last thing. There's one thing that I forgot to explain when you need to encode. That is something that we call interference. Anytime you are learning something, you attach it to a clue, either what you already know before, what is happening in your environment, a particular emotion that you are feeling at that point in time. And these clues are things that you tap into in order for you to be able to remember vividly. And if you attach a particular clue to different things, to multiple things, interference will occur. Let me use this simple example for you so that you can understand. For example, you followed someone to a restaurant and there's a particular thing that happened at that restaurant. You'll be able to remember that single information if it's attached to a particular clue. But if you took so many people to that restaurant, you will not be able to pinpoint when exactly you followed a specific person to that restaurant or what actually happened there, because you have a particular clue for different situations. So that is interference exactly, because you have a particular clue for different situations and they can be mixed up. They can be interference in when you are trying to learn. So whenever what you are learning is similar to each other, and whenever what you are learning seem to mix up, try as much as possible to be able to compare and contrast. Study them at different times, and always look for similarities and dissimilarities. Anytime you are trying to study, ask yourself, what is that thing that is different from? What is that little difference between these two things that I'm trying to learn? Because it will help you learn that thing very well, and you avoid interference while you are encoding. And that is that about encoding. Now, at this point, you've successfully encoded the information. You've done everything you need to do. But now you feel like, oh, you already know everything. Then you go the next day, you discover that none of it is there. Why? Because you don't take some things into consideration that will make you keep that information. And one particular thing that most people don't do is lack of review. If you don't review the information, there is no how you remember. Even if you encode it properly, if you don't review, there is no how you remember, because you will always forget anything you study. But then it is when you review that thing that you are studying that will make it stick over time. Like I said, anything you learn goes into short-time memory, which has limited capacity, and it can fade off at the encoding process. But if you don't review the information, there are no possibilities that it will go into the long-time memory when it has which long-time memory has unlimited capacity, and you'll be able to retrieve the information. So it is very important for you to review the information. And also, another thing that I see most students doing is mass practice. Now, what is mass practice? Mass practice is just you studying something consistently. For example, you approach a particular subject today, they taught you in class today, or you just read something today, and you keep reading it over and over and over because you just want to know it that day. You keep reading it over and over and over that particular day. It will not work out, because you can't keep you can't keep that information like that in your brain. Why can't you spread out, space the information, and try to learn at spaced interval instead of mass practice that is learning consistently on and on and on and on? Why can't you space the information? If you space the information correctly, you'll be able to interrupt the forgetting process. And if you now adopt the active recall technique, you'll be able to recall and space the information. But if you just keep going back to back, on and on, you are not helping yourself. And in fact, you can get frustrated at the end of the day. So it is important for you to space your learning instead of mass practice in order for you to keep the information very well, and it will help you to record that information eventually. In addition to spacing your learning instead of mass practice, there's a particular platform that can help you do that appropriately, which is Brilliant. Brilliant is a perfect platform with interactive lessons which includes puzzles and exercises which can make complex concepts seem easy and fun. Also, it comprises of topics ranging from data analysis, mathematics, AI, and programming. Brilliant offers ranges of benefits to students, which includes daily learning habits and learning on the go. Learning little by little is one of the most important things for academic purposes. Brilliant helps you build real knowledge in minutes daily instead of scrolling mindlessly. Brilliant makes it easy to learn anything right on your phone with fun lessons you can do whenever you have the time. Whether you are doing a new topic or you are practicing a session, Brilliant is a perfect way you can level up your progress. Also, is a good place for you to start learning data analysis with full suite of new content in data, regression model, visualization, algorithms, and lots more. And also is a good place for you to start thinking like a programmer, which will help you build apps, games, and every other thing that relates to programming. It's also a platform which is filled with so many mathematical essentials, with lessons that highlight the most helpful applicable mathematics concepts, which includes algebra, vector, calculus, and the likes. To try everything Brilliant have to offer for free for 30 days, please visit brilliant.org/Abayomi Awoshika or click the link in the description. You get 20% off on annual premium subscription. Thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video. And another thing about keeping the information, which I am guilty of, and it has cost me so many things. In fact, I failed the exam because of it, is lack of sleep. Now, when you encode something and you think that okay, you remember, or maybe you have an exam few days time and you keep studying back to back till the night of your exam, you didn't sleep, you kept studying on and on and on, and you deprive yourself from sleep. And by the time you get to the exam hall, you will not remember, because one thing that keeps your information well than any other thing is sleep. Because it is when you sleep that memory consolidation happens. What is memory consolidation? Memory consolidation is when what you learn shifts from the short-time memory to the long-time memory. And when you are encoding a particular information, it does not move to the long-time memory until you consolidate. And you can only consolidate when you are sleeping. So if you don't sleep and you think you'll be able to remember in the long term, you're not going to remember. And that is why spacing your learning is important. Because when you are spacing, you are resting at interval and you are strengthening the information alongside. But if you don't sleep, you are just overloading your working memory, because it's not moving to the long-term memory. It is your working memory you are overloading, because anything you are reading at that particular point is in the working memory. But if you sleep, you are easing stress from the working memory and you are transferring into the long-term memory. So it is important for you to relax in between studying. When you are studying, relax a bit, relax a bit and read. You have to relax or sleep a bit. You could just give yourself a little bit for 5 minutes to sleep, and you go back and read again. It is very important. I haven't discussed about how you can keep memory in your brain appropriately and avoid every mistakes that comes with keeping memory in your brain. Now let's go to the retrieval stage. Now the retrieval stage has a link with the encoding stage, because in your encoding stage, like I said you should have a clue. You should tie anything you want to learn with a clue while encoding. That is, which relates to a particular place or a particular situation that happened, and you tie it to what you are trying to learn while encoding. Now, it is that clue that you use to retrieve while you want to retrieve at the retrieval stage. Now, if you don't have a specific clue you created while you are encoding, you won't be able to use that clue to retrieve anything you need to remember. You can do that perfectly by adopting the spread activation. Now, I was talking about something at the other time when I was talking about organization of your concepts when I was talking about the deep processing. I said you can organize your concepts and you can make it have a unified meaning. You can organize list of content and make it have a unified meaning. And I made an example when someone mentions gender, male and female comes to your brain. Now, gender is more like a clue to help you remember male and female. Male and female is like a spread activation. If you have a particular thing that you want to remember and you create a spread activation, and this spread activation will help you remember the specific thing that you need to remember. So always create a spread activation for anything you need to remember, and also create a clue that will help you retrieve anything you need to learn at any particular point in time. That's all about all the stages, which is putting, keeping, and retrieving. If you got so much value from this video, please like the video and also subscribe to the channel. This video will also help you to be able to retrieve more of anything you want to learn at any point in time. So thank you so much for watching, and see you on the next one.